Oh, wait. There. That's much better. Yep. Hi everyone, I'm Janine the Alchemist and welcome to my channel. I have a confession to make, y'all. I am a Disney nerd.
What's a poor girl to do?
You guys know that I love symbolism, philosophy, and literature, art history, and that I like to just sort of talk about it all on my channel. Look, I warned you, I told you guys in my announcement video that I was just gonna start doing whatever I have always wanted to do, and so this is me doing what I want to do. Sorry, I'm taking deep breaths because I'm about to give you guys some of my origin story. My mom is actually a dancer and she was a performer, and she used to be a performer at Disneyland Park. So when I was growing up, I was a huge Disney nerd and fan. I was that friend who knew all of the hidden Mickeys everywhere. I've forgotten a lot now, but I used to know where all of the hidden messages, hidden everything in every Disney movie. I knew where the hidden Mickeys were in some of the park rides. All of that, and little girl Janine grew up to be someone who loves mythology and story, and just the story of humanity. Hold on, dishwasher. It just keeps going. Anyway, so my youngest recently turned 5, and for her 5th birthday, we went and saw the new Little Mermaid. I was very skeptical about all of these new remakes because I was the type of kid who knew all the Disney movies by like word for word, all the songs, every single word, okay? I was intense. So I was skeptical of this movie. I am wary of political agendas and things like that. Oh, by the way, I loved it. I didn't see the new Lion King, but I heard it wasn't very good. You guys tell me. But I saw Mulan. I wasn't really a fan, but it was very good, and I in fact did get emotional. And I didn't think that, you know, because I loved the old Little Mermaid. Sure, it had problematic messaging, but I did. I loved the old Little Mermaid. I liked Ariel the way that she was. Well, growing up with Brandy's Cinderella, I kind of thought maybe it would be a callback to that. I know why there's a big criticism of changing Ariel's race and changing it instead of creating a new character. I totally see that, and I wasn't sure what the purpose of changing it would be until I watched it. Once I watched it, it was exactly what I was hoping. It totally reminded me of the Cinderella with Brandy. If you know, you know. If you get it, you get it, and it's good, and it's not trying to replace the old Cinderella. It's telling the story in a different way, and in a way that resonates with a different audience. Growing up in a biracial household in the area that I live in, and in the 90s, I actually did not experience, I didn't have a lot of negative experiences with my race until I became older. Sure, there were little things, but things that I didn't really, I wasn't really affected by those things until I grew up and became old enough to think about that stuff. So overall, I grew up in this kind of bubble where I thought everyone got along, and where I thought, you know, where I thought diversity was the norm, I guess. With my upbringing, I saw a lot of different races, and I had, you know, different raced parents. So seeing different races around me playing different roles and kind of in a non-conventional way was conventional and normal for me. Seeing a movie like the Cinderella with Brandy, where there's all different races, like the daughters are different, everybody's different, it wasn't jarring for me. I actually thought that was more like real life, because in real life, you have mixed families, you have adopted families, you have a lot of different dynamics in families in real life. There's an element to life that those movies pick up that other movies did not. I was unsure if I wanted to talk about anything like this on my channel, just because I didn't want to alienate certain people. But upon reflection of all of these new movies coming out, and all of how the world is changing and how I'm raising my own children, I decided that I would talk about just the cultural impact through my lens of all of the Disney movies that introduced brown characters, and just kind of talk on that. And also very recently, my family and I just went to Disneyland for the very last time that they are gonna have Splash Mountain, and I believe it's closed now. And they're turning it into a ride for Princess and the Frog with Princess Tiana. And with all of these things from my childhood that are shifting and changing, and as I'm getting older and I'm looking back on different aspects of my life and how that's shaped me and what I've sort of taken away from it. When I was growing up and my mother was working at Disneyland, she was very limited with the types of characters that she could be. There were no black princesses. She could only be a background character or a, what is it called, like an animal character. Another reason I wanted to make this is because through all the shadow work and through everything, I've tried to tap into my ancestry. As you guys have noticed, I've been talking a lot more about that stuff here with the journey with my locks, and I tapped into generational things with my grandmothers and the different sides of my families and learning about their cultures. I've learned more about myself as a woman and I've become a mother myself, and so it's really grown my appreciation of my mother and what I learned from her. I'm starting to understand the things that she taught me. I guess I just wanted to take this Disney episode to just say thank you if you're watching, that I love you so much and you inspire me so much, and watching you work through what you worked through as it pertains to all these cultural things, and watching you be strong in yourself was inspiring to me, and it's one of the reasons that I'm able to speak here today. So I'm dedicating this episode to my mom, and also her influence is going to kind of inform some of the opinions I have. And just talking about Splash Mountain, I remember when I was younger, we used to go through the line of Splash Mountain, and my mom would tell me the story of the movie Song of the South because I hadn't seen it. A lot of people haven't seen it because it has some themes that are outdated. I am in favor of people going out of their way to try and watch it, just because I do think it's educational to see how representation on screen has sort of formed. It's become very popular to make it pretty much socially illegal to talk on certain things, or certain jokes from the past are no longer funny or could never be done now, and so then we look back in the past and we say this thing is bad and evil and that should have never happened and how horrible and terrible. But I think it's important to acknowledge baby steps that have to be taken. I think I saw, I'm gonna see if I can find it. I think I saved it. I found this TikTok of a creator talking about representation with Asian people and how it used to be a joke, and how even though in some cases it's racist, in some cases it's bad, in other cases it was good, and it was something that he appreciated and that he believed was able to make way for more Asian representation in society. And I myself carry that opinion when it comes to brown people. I'm very sorry if any of my opinions are triggering or if they are offensive to some people. I don't represent the whole. I only represent myself and my lived experience and what I've read of others, and I'm totally happy to take your feedback and all of your opinions. There are a lot of things that I don't know about, and I'm always open to learning more. I'm going to try to bring as many sides of the argument as I possibly can, and I wonder what kind of dialogue we could get from this. I am a little bit sad to see Splash Mountain go, just because I love that classic story of, I have a book of it somewhere. Let me go see if I can find it. It's a retelling of one of my favorite fairy tales and folk tales. It's actually one that I've been reading to my kids. I have the book, it's around here somewhere. It's been passed down in many cultures, so the story varies. Sometimes it's not a coyote, sometimes it's a fox. So in the story that I have, that I read with my children, that's from, I believe, South America, it's called The Story of the Rabbit and the Coyote, and how the rabbit is a trickster and how the coyote is trying to eat the rabbit. And it's a very primordial tale about elements within nature that we see commonly. People think that Song of the South was so bad because it was talking about a runaway slave, the fox and the rabbit. But I do think that if we consider the folk tale of the coyote and the rabbit that was passed down word of mouth through many tribes all throughout North America, we can see that in a way this telling of the story is is accurate in the sense that it speaks on issues that, and legends and folklore and real history of what was going on with people and dynamics. It's sad in a sense to see that it might be erased by time and be a time capsule to where we lose the historical messages. That in that sense, I'm sad to see it go. But after going on the ride and after seeing how my kids weren't even really interested in the story, they're far more interested in me spending time with them and telling them and talking to them about these stories than they were in the actual ride. So anyway, I just thought right now was the perfect time, in honor of all these changes, in honor of our changing world and of all of the history and the people, in light of all this change and in the acknowledgement of the fact that I'm being more open about who I am, as the more that I learn about myself and the more I become more comfortable with who I am and with using my voice. Wow, I got emotional. And being fully embodied in who I am, I'm being open with you guys, and at the risk of being a little bit embarrassing. So let's talk about it. Here we go. So I have IMBD up here. My phone lock screen is us on Splash Mountain. I don't know if you can see us screaming. Me, my girl, my husband, my other girl, and my son. Yeah. So let's list off the princess movies, okay? Okay, so first we had Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, that came out in 1937. Oh my gosh, you guys, I just had a flashback about from like baby me when I was like 20 doing a Facebook rant about why Snow White was actually a great story, because Refinery 29 and College Humor kept criticizing these stories, but they were doing it in such a way, like ignoring all of the literary archetypical truths of the stories and just like interpreting all the stories as like literal, which I see that there's a place for that because children are watching and they're gonna see things at face value. I totally understand why it's important to criticize that. I just felt, but I remember doing a rant about why I thought Snow White was, oh my gosh, it was such a dork. I'm always wondering about another life where I would have become like a really insane Disney adult. I kind of am, but I really try to temper it, okay? I try to temper it. Anyway, then the next princess we had was Cinderella in 1950, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp. Then we had Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, Sword in the Stone. And then we had The Jungle Book in 1967. I don't want to talk about The Jungle Book, okay? Then The Aristocats in 1970, which had some questionable references, you know, but at least Disney has put on the little disclaimers in the beginning there. And I'm a big advocate for just talking about it with your kids yourself, like talking about it. And if you really have a problem with it, you don't really have to show them those movies. Scrolling, The Black Cauldron in 1985. Then we have The Little Mermaid in 1989. Then we have Beauty and the Beast, 1991. And then I'm gonna say, for me and my childhood, I am a 1992 baby, and so this is where it kind of starts for me. Aladdin in 1992. So the first one that we have is Jasmine, but I really believe the person who shines in this is Aladdin. I'm not really sure if they represented the culture very well. For me, I loved Aladdin. It was my childhood, and I related, so I think we all kind of can relate to it. For me, I think the importance of Aladdin was just my ability to play as one of the characters, something that was kind of sad, and I do believe did shape me a little bit growing up, was the fact that all of my friends could play different characters. And I could never be any of those characters. So I would definitely pretend I was those characters when I was alone, but whenever I was in groups of friends, I would always be deferred to play like the boy character because I didn't look like the princess like my friends. So imagine if I didn't have Jasmine to at least defer to if I didn't want to play Aladdin or a villain. I think that's part of why I have such a grandiose theatrical sort of dramaticness to me is because when I was little, I was deferred to playing the male characters or the villains, and I would really get into it. Since I wasn't playing like Cinderella or the Little Mermaid in the games or even Sleeping Beauty, at least I was able to have Jasmine, and the coolest thing about Jasmine was she wore pants. Then we had the Lion King, and then here we go with Pocahontas in 1995. I understand completely the criticism of this, and what has been an interesting learning place for me is hearing more Indigenous voices on TikTok. There are so many Indigenous people speaking out about and like educating people. I already knew the story of Pocahontas. I remember when I was in junior high, my friends and I were in the library, and we were learning all about the true story of Christopher Columbus and the true story of Pocahontas. I also remember my mom taking me to Washington, D.C. when I was little and seeing Pocahontas's painting on the wall, her in like the, not Victorian, but her in the European outfit. And I remembered feeling strange when I saw her there. And so I was aware of her story, but I am going to say, at the risk of sounding like a total asshole or just uneducated, that I personally, so I can only speak for myself and not those who this messaging has actually hurt, but for me, in my childhood, Pocahontas was a game changer for me, and it was comforting for me because I'm mixed race with a white father and a black mother. And so seeing Pocahontas with John Smith was solidifying for me that being biracial was was normal and could be normal, and that there was nothing wrong with it. That movie I felt so connected to, but also because I love nature and stuff, and I've always been very interested in about like what there is to learn about the earth. Obviously, you can see by my channel that is what I'm interested in. So Pocahontas was my favorite movie. When I was little, I went through a phase where I didn't let anyone call me Janine. I told them to call me Pocahontas. I've since learned that I know that her name was not really Pocahontas, and that sadly when they changed her name to Rebecca, and her whole story is quite tragic. I will say though that I believe that if we're saying should we just get rid of these movies and not allow them to be watched, or should we keep watching them? Does watching them perpetuate some bad messaging? I don't really know. I would always, I would listen to Indigenous voices on this and keep getting educated, but from my perspective, them making the movie, I think was a good thing. I know that it's kind of disgusting the way that they turned it into a Romeo and Juliet story when that was not the case at all for what John Smith's story actually was. I know that he was romanticizing himself in his private journals and making himself sound like a hero, but we know that this story is actually full of sexual assault and ripping apart of families and deception and displays of power. But I will say, would you know about the story if Disney had not done this? Sure, we can make stories that are more accurate, but I wonder sometimes if it was an intentional provocative move to tell two stories at the same time. To juxtapose this telling of the story over what actually happened is interesting, because not only was it a Romeo and Juliet between Pocahontas and John Smith, but it was also talking about power dynamics, talking about the struggles between two different points of view in a world where that's happening politically all the time. And can we use our words to work things out and to create better outcomes? That's how I saw the story, because I myself used to be a peacemaker. I would always try to find the common ground when in arguments, because I'm just a person that I can't take arguments. Like, I need there to be like a fair trial and all that stuff. Like, I don't know, it's just how I am. I think that, number one, this movie was good for its time. It was told, this is my personal opinion, it was told in a time that it could have been taken the best, and it was introducing something in a time that, like I said, I grew up in a world where being mixed race was normal, in a time where a lot more mixed babies were booming in our culture. And so I think that telling a story where the two sides actually could get along to the children, telling a story and then having a conversation with your child about what really happened, I think that it makes it more powerful, because you grow up thinking one thing and it sparks the curiosity when you find out that it didn't really happen that way. That now it's sparked so much conversation, and it's changed the way that we viewed this character that many of us loved and looked up to, and realizing that the story was not as poetic and beautiful in real life as it was shown on screen. This movie was important for me personally, growing up in the way that I personally grew up, but I am very sorry, and I do hear the voices of those who this movie has actually harmed. And I heard that they were thinking about making the Splash Mountain into a Pocahontas ride with the logs, but in lieu and in light of what is best for the young children watching and educating people on, educating people better and trying to do better moving forward, I do actually think it was a good decision to make it into what they actually are making it into now. When initially I was upset because in my childhood I loved Pocahontas, I'm still willing to say, but I still think that moving forward though, like solidifying it in the parks, where as much as I would love to see Pocahontas more in the parks and see that, I support and I understand the choices that they are making with it. Which brings me to the next part that is a tough one for me to talk about. The very next movie that came out, The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1996. The depth, okay? Hunchback was so beautiful. And again, I am listening, there is still a lot of awareness being raised about the things that the Romani people have gone through. Hunchback of Notre Dame introduced me to Romani people. I kind of look up to that nomadic culture that takes on different spiritualities from all over the world, and they've created such an interesting bohemian lifestyle that I myself sometimes get inspiration from. I have heard some voices though saying that they hate this movie, they hate the depiction of Esmeralda, and I understand why, seeing as, I was going to read the book, but it was so fat that I just, I love to read, okay, but I opened it and it was so just going on about, the way that J.K. Tolkien, blah. The way that J.R.R. Tolkien kind of goes on about the way that the land looks for many pages or whatever. I'm cool with that. That's fine. I love attention to detail. But when I tell you that this book goes on and on about the cathedral, I appreciate architecture as much as the next guy, but it was just too much, so I couldn't read it. But what I've read is that Victor Hugo was very, very racist against the Romani people, and that Esmeralda was depicted in a disgusting way in the book. I just want to add another dimension to the conversation. It is my perspective that if you look at what the movie, not the book, but what was the message of the movie when you watched it? The message is about looking past prejudice, what the meaning of justice actually is. Just talking about how the Romani people were viewed, called witches, worthy of being burned at the stake. It's talking about that in the movie, which is addressing real life issues that the Romani people have had to face. They had to face a whole genocide, people wanting to exterminate them. That is called back to in the Disney rendition of Hunchback of Notre Dame. Again, this movie was a big one for me because out of all of the Disney princesses and females, she is the one that I looked the most like, and so I just went crazy. I just dug her vibe. For one, in older versions of Esmeralda, she was way, way, way whitewashed. In the Disney movie, they made her look like a true French Romani woman. They darkened her skin. Yes, she still has green eyes because that calls back to, I think it's like the meaning of her name, or it's calling back to something green that had to do with her in the book. So they gave her the green eyes as a callback to her original character. I believe that they build her up to be a stronger character that speaks up for others and makes a radical change. And overall, the whole story was deeply inspiring. I am sorry for anyone where this perpetuated something negative. I do think that Disney was trying to take these old stories that people love, these fairy tales, and reframe it in a more modern sense. For me, Esmeralda was very inspiring. Okay. Then we have Hercules, Mulan. I saw that one so many times in theaters. But anyone who has any input on Mulan, please write it down below in the comments. And I would love to read it, and I'm sure my viewers would like to read that too. Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis in 2001. I really want to cosplay as Keto one day. Oh my gosh. You know, I've been super interested in the Atlantis stuff lately, so maybe I should give this a rewatch. And then fast forward past a few, in 2009 we have Princess and the Frog. I remember feeling very apprehensive when Princess and the Frog came out. I just heard so much chatter about, you know, why people didn't want to watch it. I do think that that was one movie that you should watch, that I had to watch more than once to appreciate. There were things I was chewing on when I saw it in theaters. It did move me. Her story is so reminiscent of people that I know, of how hard that they've had to work to get to the places that they were at. The When We're Human song, the crocodile singing it or whatever, but it's like, it's the way that Tiana's character sings when I'm a human being, and it's almost like she's singing as if she's not a human being yet, as if there's some place that she's wishing on a star to get to, as if she wasn't, as if she's not worthy now, but someday if she works hard enough, she will earn her right to be human. I know that there's a lot of criticism of the fact that she turns into a frog right away in the movie. I do think that that is frustrating, but I also know that Disney has a global audience and baby steps to get people used to things. But I see why there's a problem with it. They use the storytelling to have a commentary about it. So she's transformed into something that isn't human, and she's trying to gain back the fact that she's a human being. But she always was. And that's part of the message, that she never had to achieve to be worthy is a huge part of her story. I'm often talking about, you know, the Nordic mythologies on this channel when I'm talking about Frozen. But I'm really happy that Disney has made movies like Moana to sort of fix the problems that there were in Pocahontas, telling stories of Native people and Indigenous people in a more accurate way, like giving Maui a full head of hair when they wanted to make him bald because hair represented power in their culture. I realized as I got older that not every child watched all the Disney movies or watched there are people I've met where they never really watched any of the movies that were characters from other cultures. And that was so strange to me because I had grown up thinking everybody watched all of them. It's because there's just so many stories to hear, and it's interesting, it's fascinating. It's the story of all of humanity when you look at it all together. But I was realizing something, that it's okay for there to be something that is not really made for everyone, even though it's fun for everyone to watch. There are some stories that are made for my demographic, speaking to people like me, and that's a comfort to me when I think about my childhood self and I think about future children. When I remember that seeing that representation on screen as a child and what that did for me, it told me that I'm normal, I'm okay, and I am like everyone else. I don't need to go and change myself in order to be worthy or in order to, and when I say change myself, I don't mean stop growing. I mean change like who I fundamentally am. When you look at a child and you think about what a child is, like, what would you want them to see? What messages would you want them to be taking in? And wouldn't you want them to know that they are perfect as they are? When I look at that child, I'm just thinking like how important it was for me to be normal. I didn't have to grow up thinking that I was different like the generations before me. And of course, like I said, I have run into challenges more so now that I'm an adult, but I am an adult and I can face these challenges. But I am so happy that I was able to experience some sort of normalcy in my childhood as far as those things. I love songs where the character is says something and then they're immediately proven wrong by like crashing into something. Like Tiana is saying like she's gonna take her place in the sun, and then she immediately ends up getting stuck in darkness, because it's basically that line is saying that her idea is way off. Like she already has her place in the sun. It's not something to be achieved. If any of you guys know what that's called in a story, what is that called when they do that in literature?
It's called a cruel irony, like my dependence on you.
It's her birthright as being a human being on this planet to live your life and be yourself and do what you're gonna do. As such a sentimental person who has a hard time with change, I for one am all for this discourse and this conversation and all these things that are springing up. And I'm so grateful that we have a world where even I can give my perspective, because I haven't really seen it. And so I thought I would put it out there, just because the fact that I have not really seen my perspective out there. And so I'm gonna say it if it's helpful to anyone and if it adds any value to the conversation. I'm proud of the progression and I'm interested in seeing where this goes. And when the Little Mermaid movie was coming out, I was scared because I was projecting. Because I'm afraid to show who I am. I've lived through times where I was afraid to be more of my authentic self or lean into my parts of my culture. I've been afraid and sometimes had whitewashed myself in the past. Watching that movie was able to speak to my inner child. And it was quite healing watching it, actually. And I'm proud and I'm excited for future generations and for my kids and whatever is to come. Yeah, I'm emotional. I gotta stop before I start crying, okay? I'm a softie. Look at that, there's the fork on the side there. Did any of you guys watch it? Go ahead and write what you guys think about it in the comments. Anything. The pros and cons of representation and how it's affected you in your life and what you've seen, and like, what are your opinions? This is just my 2 cents. Anyways, thank you so much for coming back to my channel and humoring me as I engaged with my inner child and dressed up in one of my pretty dresses, and I geeked out about Disney. I hope this video has found you well. I'll see you all in my next video.